Welcome to Annunciation Radio's Faith with Reasons, the program that examines what the church teaches and why. Faith with Reasons.
Well, hello there, and welcome to Faith with Reasons, show number 544, as we try to delve into just what the church teaches, why it teaches what it teaches, maybe get a better understanding of our faith and how our church works here. I'm Ron Finn, along with Shane Stanfield. How are you, Shane?
Pretty good, Ron. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Kind of love it. There's a lot of great weather out there, a lot of iffy weather, too.
We're dodging. It's like they're going around, and there's something dark on the horizon, so maybe we'll get some thunder.
There's always something.
Yeah.
We are very excited to have Eric Sammons on the show today. You may be well familiar with Eric. He's the editor-in-chief of Crisis Magazine and holds a degree in systems analysis with a concentration in economics from Miami University here in Ohio, as well as a master's degree in theology from Franciscan University of Steubenville. Eric is the author of several books, including Deadly Indifference, How the Church Lost Her Mission and How We Can Reclaim It. That's from Sophia Institute Press. He's also written Bitcoin Basics, 101 Questions and Answers from Saragossa Press, and The Old Evangelization, How to Spread the Faith Like Jesus Did from Catholic Answers Press. I love that, the old evangelization, as opposed to the new evangelization, right? Eric Sammons worked for more than 15 years in the software development field, including 10 years leading his own software firm. He also spent 5 years as director of evangelization for the Diocese of Venice in Florida. And so we're really happy to have him on the phone with us today. Eric has written a new book called Moral Money, The Case for Bitcoin. And this one's available now at Sophia Institute Press, sophiainstitute.com, or, of course, at your favorite Catholic bookstore. And this is a great topic because, you know, more and more we're hearing about Bitcoin. And in the beginning, we thought, stay away.
Yeah.
This is danger. And he's really, right from the very beginning, has been very interested in it and learning more about Bitcoin and adopting it as well. So I can't wait to hear his take on that. So Eric, welcome to Faith with Reasons. Thank you so much for joining us here in the Diocese of Toledo on Annunciation Radio.
Thanks so much for having me. Always appreciate being here. And of course, as a fellow Ohioan, let's go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, indeed. Love that. Now, this moral money, first of all, that's an intriguing title right off the bat. We have a faith and finance segment on our morning show, and we delve into Bitcoin now and then in kind of and tying it in with not only encyclicals but some of the church fathers and some of the church leaders have said about it and so forth. And I think I know for me and likely for a lot of our listeners, it's still a very mysterious thing to me, and don't quite understand this whole cryptocurrency thing, Bitcoin and so forth. So I'm glad you wrote this book because it kind of takes the mystery out of it a little bit and explains a little bit why we don't need to be afraid of it, do we?
No, we don't. And really, I think a lot of the first of all, there is confusion and just some mystery behind Bitcoin because it's a technical product. I was a computer programmer for many years, and that meant in my family, anytime somebody had a problem with their computer, guess who they called up and asked? Me. And I knew how frustrating it was for them because they had no idea what was going on with the computer, and I would just go sit down and 5 minutes I have it fixed, and they'd be like, "What happened?" And I try to explain to them, and a lot of times they'd be like, "Oh, never mind, just as long as it works." And it's funny because right now, literally after this interview's over, I'm going to go pick up my car at the shop, and that's how I feel at the mechanic because I know nothing about cars.
Mm-hmm.
It's very mysterious to me. Yeah. I know how to drive one, but when something goes wrong, I'm just like, please fix it and please don't scam me.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that really, and I feel like I've noticed that's very true with a lot of people with Bitcoin, is simply it's just hard to get their heads around. But I think there's a more fundamental issue here, and that is I think most people don't understand money. Mm. And since Bitcoin is a form of money, it's very difficult to understand Bitcoin. Not even the technical parts. I don't understand like every single aspect of the technical underlying. I understand a lot of it, but not all of it. But I just mean like what it is, and because people don't actually know what money is. And I think that's why, in fact, that's why in my book, the first few chapters are not really about Bitcoin. They're about money, about the money. What is money? What are the properties of money? how do we use money? And also, and this is probably the most controversial part, I would say, is why is our current monetary system, I would say, is fundamentally immoral from a Catholic point of view. So that's kind of how I go about it. And I think once people start to understand the money we use now better, that's when they start understanding, oh, we probably do need an alternative. And then they think, oh, well, let's look at this Bitcoin thing. Oh, I see now why it was created. I see now why it was created the way it was created, because it honestly was created as a response to our current immoral monetary system. I'm not saying the person, Satoshi Nakamoto, which is the pseudonym for the person, we don't actually know who it was. I'm not saying he was explicitly saying like he was Catholic or anything like that, but I do think he was definitely saying the current system is broken, it's immoral, it harms people, and we need a new system, and that's why he created Bitcoin.
Very good.
That's a great point and a good perspective, too, because you're talking about something that we use every day, sometimes several times a day, and you're right, we have very little, if any, understanding of how this whole monetary system works. And, of course, when we first started using money, I'm sure it was a little purer than it is now. Everything established gets corrupted over time, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, the history of money, I've always been fascinated by. I know it would bore some people, but I find it very fascinating. Just how did money develop? Because people really don't know that. We kind of think of it, I think most people might think, oh, some king somewhere said, okay, we're going to use silver as money. We're going to use gold as money or something like that. But that's not really what happened. What happened over time was people realized it doesn't really make sense for me to trade my bananas for your cows. That just isn't practical. It doesn't work. We need some third good, some third item that besides bananas and cows, that we both agree, yeah, this is worth something. So let's just trade for that. I'll sell my bananas to somebody for that third thing, and I'll give that third thing to you for your cows later. And of course, that third thing is what we now call money. And lots of different things in history have been used as money. But until around the last maybe couple hundred years, it was always some natural thing. What I mean by that is something that was part of nature that God created. So, for example, seashells have been used. Rocks have been used as money. And the most popular and the most well-known is gold and silver, and even copper some. And those, of course, are something we get out of nature. I mean, nobody creates gold out of nothing. Alchemy, we found, was a fool's errand in the Middle Ages. And so you have to dig it out of the ground. And so, so these things were natural things that people realized, okay, we all value this. And there's reasons why certain things got to be valued. It had to do with their properties. Like gold, for example, people realize, okay, this is very durable. It's going to last for a very long time. This is something we can easily divide up and make it easy. I could buy a dozen bananas, or I could buy an entire cow, because with gold, I can divide it up. It's very portable. I can move it around easily. Things like that. It's scarce. It's not like somebody could just walk in one day and say, okay, I'm just going to create a bunch more gold. That would, of course, make the money end up being worthless if somebody could just do that out of the blue. And so this is kind of the history of money that we don't really learn very much, but it kind of tells what money is. And then when you look at the history more, you see and this gets to your point about things eventually getting corrupted in our fallen world. What we see is, like, in the past 100 years in particular, and before that it was happening, but it really kind of got ensconced in the early 20th century, we found government leaders, politicians started to say, it'd be a lot easier for us if we could just create money. If we could just print some paper and say, this is money, and everybody would accept it. It started with, we'll print paper that represents real money, like gold, like silver. But eventually they thought, it'd be a lot easier if we could just print more money when we need it. And World War I actually was a major event in this history, in this evolution, what I would actually call in the book a devolution of money, because during World War I, which was one of the most horrific wars in history, many of the countries involved in it, what they did was they stopped the redemption of paper money for gold, and they just said, okay, we're just going to print more paper money, because that way we can pay for the war, pay to keep on fighting or what have you. We don't have to worry about, like, the people having to support this war or not support it. And this is on all sides. This isn't just the Allies or the other side. And so what happened was that they kind of realized, well, this works out pretty well for us. If we can do unpopular things, and we don't have to worry about the people revolting because they're paying too high taxes, because we can just print new money. And so eventually that's what happened until in the 1970s, 1971 in particular, is when finally basically every government in the world, taking the lead of the United States, said, okay, all money that we use now, all legal tender is going to be paper money. Meaning, and when I say paper, I don't mean that, digital, there's digital aspects of it. Obviously, we spend dollars and stuff online, stuff like that. But I just mean money that you can just, quote unquote, print either by literally a printing press, or you could just press a button on a computer and say, okay, now we have more money. And so really it's another word for it is fiat money, which Catholics might hear and say, hey, that sounds like a good thing. Fiat, Mary's fiat. Let it be done to me according to thy word. But unfortunately, in this, it's more like a kind of diabolical inversion of the word fiat, because it's the government official saying, let it be done the way we mean, let us just go ahead and print more money. And so you call it fiat money, you call it paper money, whatever you want to call it, government money. But the point is now governments had 100% and complete control of the money supply, which they didn't with gold, they didn't with silver, or anything, even copper, which is much more common. There is a limit to how much copper there is in the world. So that really changed what money is. And most of us, I don't know about you, but I don't know many people over the age of 100, they've lived their whole life under this, under kind of a fiat system in which government has 100% control of the money supply. And there's a lot of consequences to that.
So it seems like, you're talking about this time period in the early 20th century. It seems like this is pretty much tied to that date when the Federal Reserve was created.
Yes, the Federal Reserve, that is, 1913 is really the moment in the United States, at least, where we really did shift. Now, it wasn't an immediate shift overnight, but that was then the ability for the Federal Reserve to basically print more money. And for those who are very knowledgeable about this, they know I'm being a little bit generic in how I explain this. It's a lot more complicated, but that's essentially what they're doing. Because in 1933, FDR, he basically confiscated all the gold in the country. Now, of course, a lot of people didn't turn it in, but he said it's illegal to own gold. And then after World War II, there was this what's called the Bretton Woods system, in which other countries were dependent upon the U.S. dollar, and the United States said, we will redeem our dollar for gold. And finally, in 1971, President Nixon said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. And the funny part was he said, temporarily, we're going to stop doing this. And of course, we all know what happens when the government does something temporarily. Yeah. It becomes the most permanent thing on earth. Yeah. But yes, the Federal Reserve was the big moment, definitely, where the process really started of, okay, now we're going, and the arguments used were, I'm not trying, I want to try to give some credit. I think some of the people involved in this were actually bad people and evil people who want power and corruption and all that. But I do think a lot of people were just misinformed, uneducated, or just wrong about what they thought about money. They thought if the government controls money, what will happen is we can then control the economy. We can make it so that we don't have terrible things happen. Well, if you know the history of our country's economy, it's not like the last 100 years have been some great, only great. We've had a depression, we've had a great recession. But the most important thing to note for our purposes is if you look at the value of $1 in 1913 versus the value of $1 today, basically $1 in 1913 is now worth about 3 cents, I think it is. It might actually only be 1 cent. I can't remember exactly, but it's under 5 cents.
Wow.
In actual purchasing power. So what you could buy for $1 in 1913, you can only get about less than 5 cents worth. The value of the dollar has gone down. And this just makes sense when you understand when somebody can just print more money, that means the money that's already in the system goes down in value. If there's $1 million, let's say a village of 1,000 people, there's $1 million total in that, in their economy. Let's say they're on an island, they have no other, they don't have any global trade or anything like that. Well, that means prices are going to be based upon the fact that there's $1 million in that economy. Well, if all of a sudden somebody shows up on a boat, he's got $10 million of his own, he drops in there and he decides he drops that into the economy. Now all of a sudden there's $11 million in money supply. He's going to be able to buy anything he wants. But then when he starts doing that, that money starts to go around, so all prices go up. So what was $1 in the past doesn't go up, it isn't worth the same later. Now, it might be fine if that was all fairly distributed, but if you look at the history of how this happens, what happens to people most closely connected to the money supply, the money producers, i.e. the government, the banks, they're the ones who do benefit the most. The people furthest from that, i.e. poor people, middle class people, people not connected to the government, connected to the banks, they're the ones who suffer because prices go up, but they don't get the same rise in their wages and how much they make, so their income. So what happens is they just get poorer. And we know this actually, if you think about it, if a poor person, for example, who often does not have access to a lot of the financial instruments that richer people have, if he just says, I'm gonna work hard, I have a wife and kids, I'm going to support them, but he's not making, he's got some job where he's only making maybe $30,000-$40,000 a year, and he's trying, his wife doesn't work, he's just trying, he's like, I'm doing the right thing, and he just saves his money, and he saves his cash, and he just maybe puts it into a jar in his closet. Well, if he saves it over time, that money gets worth less and less and less and less. He's actually losing money over time. And so then what happens is we have a whole host of problems that are caused by this monetary system we have. And one of them is an example is everybody needs to become an investor all of a sudden. You have to know the stock market. You have to try to time it like, oh, I need to get the latest tech stock in order to get NVIDIA or Apple or Microsoft, whatever, in order to just stay ahead of inflation. Because that's inflation means the inflation of the money supply, which in turn causes the rise of prices. And so we get this whole situation where people are become gamblers basically with their money, not because they're like, I want to get rich, but just I want to just be able to save for a rainy day if there's a medical emergency in my family or the car breaks down, or I just save for a little bit for retirement. They can't do that just by a little savings account at the bank or saving at home. And if you look historically, though, that is how people save. You just kept your gold. You just you when the money was gold, you just kind of kept it in that. And so, and that kept its purchasing power. In fact, I remember seeing one time that like an ounce of gold in like Roman times would have bought you a nice toga, and an ounce of gold today buys you a nice suit. So it basically kept its value over 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And so that, as opposed to, like I said, the dollar, which over 100 years has gone down to almost nothing. And if you look at other fiat government currencies around the world, many of them just go to zero eventually because their countries aren't quite as powerful as the United States are. I mean, I have sitting next to me on a desk next to me right now, $1 million Zimbabwe dollar note. And somebody gave it to me as kind of representation of what fiat money happens. Zimbabwe had all these financial problems, and they literally were printing $1 million notes because that was worth probably, I don't know, maybe $5 at the time or something like that, because their money had gotten so worthless. So imagine you had saved up Zimbabwe dollars your whole life. You had been working hard, and you saved, let's say you saved, 100,000 Zimbabwe dollars. So, okay, I'm set. Then all of a sudden it just goes to zero and you're out of luck. And so you can see though how money, the form of money we use, the monetary system we're part of, really does have a lot of consequences, and they're moral consequences in the economy for real people. And another example I just want to bring up here, because I think it resonates especially with Catholics. I think what happens is that people are pressured, families are pressured for both spouses to work, even if the wife doesn't want to and wants to stay at home with the kids, but has to because they have to keep up with this inflation. But also what you see is, and you see this a lot of times, people delay having children or have fewer children simply because they feel like they can't afford it. And the reason they can't afford it is because the money keeps devaluing. Prices keep going up. And so, like, I know as Catholics, we know that we should be open to God, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't. What I'm saying is regular people out there who might not even be Catholic, might not be practicing Catholic, they make real moral decisions based upon the monetary system we use. And I compare it in the book. In fact, I compare it to St. John Paul II. He talked about structures of sin. I remember this very distinctly in the 80s and 90s when he talked about this. And he was talking about like the culture of the culture of death and how abortion. We're all kind of involved in abortion. I mean, our tax dollars go to pay for it. The whole system is set up for abortion. I'm not saying we're guilty of a personal sin of abortion, but what I'm saying is that we are connected to it, involved in it. That's the structure of sin. And I feel like our current fiat monetary system is a structure of sin, and we're all involved in it. I'm not saying we're personally morally responsible. I'm saying we do all participate in it, and so it really causes a lot of moral problems that we often don't think about.
Our guest on Faith with Reasons, Eric Sammons, whose book Moral Money, The Case for Bitcoin, is out now and available from Sophia Institute Press. And Eric, as you talk about the current fiat monetary system and really how the whole system is really immoral, let's look at Bitcoin and find out if you say that this is the most moral money ever created. How can that be?
Right. Yeah, so that's why I like these longer interviews like this. I've had 10-minute interviews on this book, and you can hardly say anything because I like the fact that we can talk about money generally first, because that's really the basis before we can
It's always good to talk about things that
Bitcoin.
you don't personally have, so go ahead.
That too, exactly. So what I'm saying is like there's 7 properties of money that economists have kind of found. 4 of them are related to the usefulness of it. So I already mentioned something like divisible, durable, portable, and what's called fungible. And that just means that 1 unit of that money is worth the same as another unit. So 1 ounce of gold is worth the same as another ounce of gold. If you're using seashells, that might not be true because one seashell might be a lot nicer or bigger than the other one. And so those are the 4 kind of usefulness or efficiency properties. But there's 3 other properties that are what I term moral properties of a form of money. The first one is scarcity. And what that means is, again, it just can't be created out of nothing. It's not easy to create. And the reason that's important is what we were just talking about, meaning you can't devalue what money somebody else owns. If I can print more money, I can devalue your money. So scarcity is one property. Another property is moral property. Another property is verifiability, meaning it's relatively easy to confirm this is what it says it is. Now, I will say that with the advancement of technology, most fiat money today is very verifiable. You can know if it's counterfeit or not pretty easily. So I would argue that most forms of money today are pretty verifiable. But scarcity, verifiability, and the other moral property is independence, basically meaning that nobody controls the money supply. No one person or group or small group controls it. Because like I said, once you can control it, you have more power, you have more riches, and you have more control over others, because the people closest to the production of new money are the ones who benefit from it the most. And so a money that's independent of any small group of people or one person is more moral than money that's not. So I just listed those 7 properties of money. So what Bitcoin did was, Bitcoin saw, the inventor of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, and other people saw it too, they just couldn't solve the problem technically. What we saw was, okay, fiat money is great for usability. It really, you can buy something on Amazon, put your credit card in, boom, you got it the next day. And so it's very easy to buy. You can go to the store, you can buy something very easily. But it's not very moral. On the other hand, gold is very moral. It's scarce, it's independent, it's verifiable, but it's not very easy to use. It's like, go try to buy something on Amazon with an ounce of gold. It's just not, you're going to have to go through a million steps. It's just not very easy to happen. If you bring an ounce of gold to the local store, and you want to buy a pack of bubble gum with it, you're just not going to be able to do it. And so it's not very usable. So people actually, with the advent of advanced technology like cryptography and things like that, people did, as early as the 1970s, start saying, wouldn't it be great if we could create a form of money that was as usable as fiat money, but it was as moral as gold? And people tried in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and they failed. There was some technical problem with it. There was it wasn't fully independent, or whatever the case may be. Finally, in 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto introduced Bitcoin, which took the efficiency and usefulness of fiat money, and it married it to the morality of gold. It's scarce, and we can talk about how it's these things in a moment, but it's scarce, it's verifiable, it's extremely verifiable, in fact, and it's independent. No one person or group controls it. And so that's why I would argue that Bitcoin is the most moral money, because it's, first of all, it has as moral properties as gold, but it even goes one step further. And we can go into these details in a moment, but it's because it's actually more scarce than gold is. Gold, you technically, they say there's gold, lots of gold on like asteroids. What happens when we advance to the point where we can mine asteroids very easily? All of a sudden the gold supply goes up a lot. It's actually not as scarce. Whereas Bitcoin has a very fixed and limited supply of Bitcoin. There's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be created ever in the history of Bitcoin. And so it has this fixed cap of money supply. So it's even more scarce than gold. So for all those reasons, that's why I call Bitcoin moral money, because I think it's the best form of money we have today. It's the most moral form.
So I guess this would be a good time, and I know we've only got a couple more minutes before we move into our break, but we can start the conversation of exactly what is a Bitcoin, how is it produced, and who controls that production. And I guess that just stems to what you just said. I mean, there's only 21 million of these things available. Well, what are they? Where do they come from?
Right. And that's exactly where everybody has their moment of, okay, I got to get over this hurdle because it can be hard to understand. The first thing to note is Bitcoin resides 100% on the internet. And so there is no physical, like on my cover of my book, I even have a little coin that has a B on it, looks like Bitcoin. And I almost didn't want to do that because I don't want to confuse people, think there's actually such a thing as a Bitcoin coin, physical coin. There isn't. It's 100% on the internet. And so I like to compare it to email. Think about email. And those of us who are older, and I'm just going to assume that the three of us at least are part of that group, and maybe some of our audience as well.
I'm getting there.
We remember a time where all mail was physically delivered to you. It came to your mailbox, you went out there, you grabbed it, you opened it up, and it's all physical. Well, then all of a sudden, email came around. I remember actually the moment I first started using email as a systems analysis major at Miami. This was like 1990 or so, 89, 90. And I got an email address. I was like, what is this? What even is this? And like, oh, this is how you're going to communicate with other students. This is like before email had gotten big, of course. And so nobody even knew what it was. I remember at one point emailing somebody in Germany in like 1991 or something like that. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever because I was like, holy cow. But email doesn't exist except for on the internet. I mean, you can print it out. But like the truth is email itself exists only as zeros and ones on the internet. And email is complete. And the analogy to Bitcoin is very good with email because I think people understand at least the basics of how email works. But think about when you send an email. You type something in, maybe you attach a photo or something like that, and then you hit send. Well, what happens to that when you hit that? Well, underneath, I actually used to work. I ran a internet hosting company, web hosting company, in the late 90s when it was getting big, and so I had to understand how all this worked underneath. Most people don't understand, but the basics is what happens is there's what's called a protocol, and that's software that runs on a bunch of servers that are connected to the internet, and it determines how email is routed, how it goes to where it goes. So I say I want to send it to, george@gmail.com. Well, then it goes. The protocol then sends that email to a server, that text message, let's say, to a server, and it says, okay, I need to find where gmail.com emails are stored. I need to go there. Okay, I go there, and then I determine George gets it, and it sends it to george@gmail.com. So that's how basically email gets to where it wants to go.
Good place to hold for a moment there as we hear the music and take a short break here on Faith with Reasons. We will pick it up right from there when we come back from the break. You're listening to Faith with Reasons. Ron Finn and Shane Stanfield with our guest Eric Sammons and the book Moral Money, The Case for Bitcoin. We'll be right back.
Are you or someone you know hurting from a past abortion? Contact Project Rachel for confidential help in starting your healing journey. Please call 419-260-5811 or visit hopeafterabortion.org. God's mercy is abundant and waiting for you. Project Rachel is here to offer confidential help on your journey to healing.
Stephen Rossetti, in his book, The Joy of Priesthood, lists one of the most satisfying and purpose-filled occupations is to be a Catholic priest. I must wholeheartedly agree and add to this fine study that to be a Franciscan friar is even better. My name is Friar John, and I need you to encourage a culture of vocations by looking at the talent around you and approaching a man to say, have you ever considered being a Franciscan brother or maybe a Franciscan priest? The life of a Franciscan friar will bring you not only great satisfaction, but great joy. Consider your call to become what God is calling you to be. If you are a man between the ages of 18 and 40, I'd love to have you attend one of our Come and See vocation retreats. For more information, contact me, Friar John, at franvoke@aol.com or www.franciscans.org.
Your St. Vincent de Paul Toledo thrift store has moved. Our new location is 5311 Airport Highway in the Airport Square Shopping Center, right next to Pet Supplies Plus at Airport and Reynolds. Come check out our new store. Open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday, accepting donations from 10 to 4. come see the new location of the St. Vincent de Paul Toledo Thrift Store, Airport Highway at Reynolds Road.
Now, back to Faith with Reasons here on Annunciation Radio.
Hey, welcome back here. Shane Stanford with Ron Finn, and today we're blessed to have Eric Sammons on the phone with us talking about his latest book, Moral Money, The Case for Bitcoin. Eric's the editor-in-chief at Crisis Magazine. He holds a degree in systems analysis with concentration in economics from Miami University in Ohio, as well as master's degree in theology from Franciscan University of Steubenville. He's the author of several books, actually, including Deadly Indifference, How the Church Lost Her Mission and How We Can Reclaim It. And then also another Bitcoin book, Bitcoin Basics, 101 Questions and Answers. So, Eric, we were discussing, right as the break started, your explanation of what Bitcoin actually was, and you began with an analogy that it's much like email, and you were describing the protocol of basically the system that is underlying of the email delivery system. So I'll let you pick it up from there.
Yeah, and so what's important to remember is nobody controls email. I realize that lots of people have Gmail accounts or maybe Hotmail accounts, whatever. And yes, Google does control your Gmail account. What I mean by nobody controls email, I mean is nobody controls the sending and receiving of email around the world. If you want to, you could create your own email server, and you could send and receive email to whoever you wanted to, and really nobody can stop you. And so that, by that I mean is that email, the protocol, because what's happening is lots of servers around the world, tens of thousands of servers around the world, are running this email protocol that tells servers, okay, how do I route the email to who? How do I do this? You can go and start up a certain, now most of us can't do this. I used to be able to do this. I've probably forgotten how to now. But like you can, so email is decentralized, meaning that the protocol itself is not something controlled by a government or by a company or by a person. Okay, so that being said, now we kind of understand that's how email works. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin works in a very similar way. It also is a software protocol, and that protocol runs on computers around the world. And in fact, right now there's about 20,000. There's actually a website that tracks every computer that runs them. And anybody can run this. I actually run one of these. It's called a Bitcoin node. And you just install the software. It's free. You don't need a sophisticated computer. You can do it with a laptop. You hook up to the internet. And now all of a sudden, your computer is one of those computers on the internet that runs the protocol that is confirming all the transactions that are happening in Bitcoin. Now, the analogy does break down a little bit technically, but I'm not going to bother with that with email. But the point is, basically what this software does is it's like, okay, you claim you have this much Bitcoin, and you claim you have enough, you're going to send it to this person. Okay. When you try that, what the nodes do is they confirm that's true. Is it true that you really do control the amount of Bitcoin? Let's say you're trying to send 0.1 Bitcoin to somebody. Do you really have control of 0.1 Bitcoin? If you don't, then it's going to fail. It's not going to happen. If you do have control of it, great. It will send it to the address you send it to. And now all of a sudden, what this protocol does, it creates what's basically an accounting ledger that every single node has on their computer that tracks how much Bitcoin every address controls. So it might say Bitcoin address 1 controls 5 Bitcoin. Bitcoin address 2 controls, 3 Bitcoin. Bitcoin address 3 controls 0.1 Bitcoin, whatever. It's tracking all that. So when I send 0.1 Bitcoin to somebody else, the ledger then gets updated by all this software, all these servers around the world, all update, all 20,000 plus of them update. And you say, okay, now Eric has 0.1 less Bitcoin than he used to have. And George, the guy you sent to, now has 0.1 more Bitcoin than he has. Note in this process, though, there was no company involved in this. There was no government involved in this. It was simply done like me handing cash to another person. If you think about when you hand cash, in fact, Bitcoin originally was called an electronic cash system because Satoshi likened it to cash, that there's no third party that needs to verify what's going on. The software itself does all that work for you, and it says, okay, and you sent this amount of Bitcoin. And the other thing about this software is it's what's called open source software. And this is common on these protocols on the internet. They're open source. What that means is everybody can read the source code. It's public to the whole world. which some people might first think, well, doesn't that make it insecure? But it's literally the opposite. It makes it more secure. Because now what happens is the whole world can see, oh, are there any bugs in this? I'm going to try to hack this. I'm going to try to see if I can manipulate it to do what I want. And then everybody can kind of see, nope, it works. They all try, they all fail, and they see there's no hidden code in there that says, okay, actually take a certain percentage of off each Bitcoin transaction and send it to me instead. Trying to hack that. You couldn't do it because the software just simply, everybody can read it, and people would know, oh, you just tried to insert a line into the Bitcoin code. We're not going to allow that. So the 20,000 nodes all reject you as a node and say, you're trying to run software that's not compatible with the overall network. We're going to reject anything that comes from your node. So it's all these like checks and balances to make it so you could have digital money. Because the real challenge, well, there's a number of them, but one of the main challenges with digital money was, how do you prevent somebody from copying it? Mm-hmm. Think about if I send you an email with the attached image, all you need to do is do a copy paste, and you have another copy of that image you can send to somebody else.
Correct.
The image I sent you now exists in three places. It's on my computer still, it's on your computer, and it's on that third person you sent it to. Well, obviously you can't do that with money. If I send you one Bitcoin and I still keep the one Bitcoin and you can send it to somebody else while you keep it, well, that's worthless money, because you have to have a fixed amount of money. You can't just counterfeit it easily. And so what Bitcoin does is that ledger is really what's happening. That's what's driving everything. You have this public ledger that anybody can read. All the software is looking at that and saying, okay, and it's one coordinated ledger that all the world kind of can see and say, okay, this person, they sent one Bitcoin. That means they don't have it anymore. They can't send it again. It's like the double spend problem is what's called. Before Bitcoin was created, that's what people were trying to solve, the double spend problem. How do I keep it from I send you one Bitcoin, but then the next day I can send somebody else the same Bitcoin? Well, that's what the protocol controls, and that's what that distributed ledger is what they call it. The blockchain is the name people have heard of a lot. Yeah. That's the ledger that keeps track of all the transactions. Every transaction since Bitcoin started in 2009 is on the blockchain.
So in the previous half hour of the show, you mentioned that there can never be any more than 21 million of these things. What exactly is it? Is it a share? Is it you said that obviously it's nothing physical. It's not a physical coin,
right?
But it's a unit of something, and of course the value of this thing is going up because you're talking 2010 when this thing was rolled out. You could buy a Bitcoin for less than a penny, but as of today, it's well over $119,000. So what is that? I mean, is it a share?
Right. So what we'll do is we'll stick. Let's ignore for a moment the price in dollars of Bitcoin and just look at the technical aspects, kind of what Bitcoin is. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's a unit of measure. And so what happened is when Satoshi first created it, he created what are called blocks. That's why it's called blockchain. Every block contains all the transactions since the last block was created. And about every 10 minutes, a new block is created with all the transactions that have occurred over the last 10 minutes. So if like 100 people sent Bitcoin over the last 10 minutes, those 100 transactions will be included in that block. And what happens with each block, new Bitcoin are created, new units are created. The first block had 50, and for a long time it was 50 every 10 minutes. And then over time, the number of new Bitcoin created goes down until eventually it will be zero. Right now, I believe it's 3.125 units. And basically, it's just like a unit in like it's all digital. And so it'd be like unit in a spreadsheet of just saying, one of this or two of this. Mm-hmm. And you can divide it all the way up into 8 decimal points in the software. The software allows you to have 0.000701 of Bitcoin. And that smallest unit is called a Satoshi after the inventor of Bitcoin. But the point is that what happens is this is kind of a genius of how Bitcoin was created. That process of creating new blocks is also the process in which Bitcoin is secured. Because that's the other big problem. Your double spend problem is a big problem. The other problem is you got to make it so people can't hack in and steal people's Bitcoin. That's very important, obviously, for money. It can't be easy to steal. Well, the process, which is called mining, and it's kind of taken after the idea of you mine for gold. Well, in mining, you create new Bitcoin on a very strict schedule. You're rewarded. Bitcoin is really what's happening for mining. Well, the mining is basically the security process of Bitcoin. What it's doing is it's saying, okay, we're going to secure the network, and make it impossible for people to create Bitcoin out of nothing. Because that's the real threat, is somebody could just create new Bitcoin out of nothing. And, just say, okay, I want 100 Bitcoin, I'm going to create them for myself. You just can't do that. What has to happen is you have to follow the schedule created by the software. It says, okay, every 10 minutes, a new set of Bitcoin are going to be created, and that's going to decrease over time until, I think it's in 2140, I believe is when the last block will be mined where new Bitcoin will be created, and then there'll be 21 million total. And so that it's like the first 4 years, it was 50 Bitcoin created every block. The next 4 years, 25, and it just halves each time the amount. So that's what happens. Now that's just technically what it is. It's just a unit on a ledger in a digital ledger. Just saying, okay, this person has one of these. This person has two of these. This person has 0.002 of these, or whatever the case may be. Now, the price of it, like you said, when it first came out, it was worth nothing. You could buy, 1,000 Bitcoin for, a couple pennies or something like that. Now, like you said, it's one Bitcoin's worth 119,000. And now that is simply the market at play. That's simply people deciding, more and more people started to learn about it and explore it and realize, wait a second, I like this. I think this actually could work. I think this is something that could replace or at least coincide with and work with our current government system. And I like it because it's more efficient, but it's also more moral. And so more and more people just simply said, I would like some of this. I think this is something worthwhile to hold. I think it could store my dollars. I know can't store value. I know if I just hold my money in dollars, eventually that will be worth nothing over enough period of time. So most people think, okay, I want to put in gold. I want to put in stocks. I want to put in something. Well, more and more people start to say, I think I want to put in Bitcoin because I like this design. I think this does have the properties of money. I think this is something that could store my value over time. Well, then the more people do that, obviously the price of it's going to go up. If you have two people who both want one Bitcoin, one's willing to pay $5 for it, the other one's willing to pay $10 for it. Well, the price of a Bitcoin is $10 then, because that's the person who got it was the person who paid the most, $10. Mm-hmm. And that just continues to happen until more and more people come in. I've been involved in Bitcoin since 2013. When I first got involved, it was under $1,000 for one Bitcoin. And I, of course, have seen it rise greatly over time. Yeah. And what it is, and it's gone, and people know how volatile. That's one thing Bitcoin's famous for, is because it goes up, it goes down. It goes up, it goes down. But the fact is, it goes up more than it goes down. Yes. Obviously, if it went from 0 to 119,000 over enough time, it goes up more than it goes down. And that's simply the market, meaning people around the world. That's another important thing to remember. This is not an American product. This is something that's global. It crosses all borders. More and more people around the globe. And then eventually, in recent years, it's been corporations and even governments have started to say, I think I want to own some of that because I think it's going to store my value. It's going to, in order to store it's going to keep my purchasing power better than just cash. And some of them start saying, I think it even keep my purchasing power better than gold or better than stocks. Now, whether or not that's true is somewhat, in my mind, a little bit irrelevant. What matters to me is that it's the properties make it moral, but also it does store value. How much it stores value? Like, will it, in 10 years, will Bitcoin go up more in value than, NVIDIA stock or an ounce of gold? I don't know. I think it will, just based upon a lot of reasons. But do I know that? No, I can't predict that. But what I do think, with a relative amount of confidence, is it will store value, my purchasing power. It won't be all of a sudden in 10 years like the dollar. If I just kept it in a cookie jar in my house, it won't go down in value over a long enough period of time. So that's really the explanation for the price, is simply the free market. And that's the one thing about Bitcoin that people don't realize sometimes. It's literally the most free market asset in the world, because gold is actually controlled a lot by governments and by nation states. The dollar, obviously, 100% controlled. The stock market is very regulated. I mean, if all of a sudden things start going haywire during a trading day, they will shut down the market temporarily. Yeah. So it's that's controlled. That's not a true free market. Well, Bitcoin doesn't have any of that. And because there's nothing that stops somebody from buying Bitcoin from another person. Now, that means, though, that you can have significant price drops in one day. I have seen Bitcoin go down 80% over a few month period, like maybe 6 to 9 months, go down in value by 80%. But it always came back. And that's because free market, it's like there's more volatility, more people just saying, maybe something happens in the world like, I want to get out of Bitcoin for a reason. I want to get into Bitcoin for a reason. And so that's why you see these kind of more dramatic changes than you would see in gold or in stocks, simply because there's no regulation of it. There's no it's a true 100% free market.
So I need to ask, how is this mined? You said there's obviously you're going to continue mining for Bitcoin until 2040, 40 something. And so there's more to be found. How is that done, and who does it? I mean, can I start mining for Bitcoin? I mean, is it?
You can.
Yeah.
You can, but we've gotten to a point now where it's very expensive because of the fact that it's valuable. When Bitcoin first started, you could literally mine Bitcoin with your laptop. Now, you would never, ever, you could technically mine with your laptop, but you would never, ever win the war in order to actually mine a block. What happens is, so every 10 minutes or so, a new block is created, meaning all the transactions are confirmed that were made in the last 10 minutes, and new Bitcoin is generated, some small amount now, like I said, 3.125. What's happening is a bunch of basically very sophisticated computers are competing to solve a mathematical puzzle. Whoever solves it first wins the block. They get they process the transactions, they get the transaction fees, and they get that new Bitcoin created. And so at first, like I said, it was so few people were doing it. There was like maybe 2 or 3 laptops competing against each other. You could mine hundreds of Bitcoin in a day. Now you could spend thousands and thousands of dollars and not even win one block in a day, because there's so many people, people spending a lot of money to do this. And that's a great thing, because like I said, remember, mining is actually the way you secure Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And because it's like literally Bitcoin has what's equivalent to all the most powerful supercomputers combined, basically, is how powerful the Bitcoin network is now, because all these supercomputers like basically mining Bitcoin. That's what's securing it. You would need to spend almost an infinite amount of money now to try to hack the Bitcoin network. You could have hacked it in 2010 with a decent computer. Not even decent, but you had to have some money. But like you could have had a few $1 million, which isn't much for some people. You could have a few $1 million, and you probably could have hacked the Bitcoin network. But nobody, of course, knew about it. Nobody even cared. Why bother hacking? It was worth nothing. And so what happened was, now that Bitcoin's worth a lot, people might think, I'd love to hack it, but now it's basically impossible, because it costs so much money, and it just, all what happened was you would end up failing in the end. You wouldn't have enough money to do it. So mining is this process where very advanced computers are competing to get the next block, to confirm the next block, which means they get the transaction fees for every transaction since the last block, and they get that new Bitcoin that's created. And that, like I said, secures the network, makes it so nobody can go in and hack it.
Interesting. The book, again, is called Moral Money, The Case for Bitcoin. And Eric Sammons is the author, joining us here on Faith with Reasons. And I got to ask, I think a lot of people have this question. Say you invest in Bitcoin, how do you use it? How do you conduct normal transactions with it? Do you convert it to cash, or what's the next step in terms of spending with it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because money has 3 uses historically. First, it's a store of value. It's what we've been talking about. It keeps its value over time. Second, it's a medium of exchange, meaning you can send it to somebody else and they're going to accept it and give you what you just bought for with it, like whether it's gasoline or milk or whatever. Mm-hmm. Third is it's a unit of account, meaning things are priced in that. Right now, the unit of account is obviously dollars. When you go to the store, everything's priced in dollars, not in Bitcoin. Right now, Bitcoin, being 16 years old, isn't that old of a money. It's still in that store of value phase, and it's moving into a medium of exchange phase. For example, at my website, ericsammons.com, you can buy my book with Bitcoin if you wanted to. You can also use credit card, but you could actually spend your Bitcoin with me. And there are a number of places, more and more over time, that accept Bitcoin. One of the funniest ones was about a month ago. Steak and Shake, the restaurant chain, started accepting Bitcoin at their restaurants, and it was kind of fun.
Really?
And so I could go to Steak and Shake, buy a burger and fries with Bitcoin. The truth is, though, the vast majority of places you go, you can't use Bitcoin. Most people don't accept it. You can't buy something at Amazon, Bitcoin, anything like that. What you have to do then is you have to exchange your Bitcoin for dollars and then use those dollars. And so what happens is, first you buy Bitcoin, usually at an exchange, and meaning you send them dollars, and then they give you Bitcoin in return. You hold on to that Bitcoin for a while, and if, let's say, you decide, I need to spend some of that, well, then what you do is you sell some of that for dollars, and then you spend it. Now, I think I've been around long enough to know I've seen it grow. Like in 2013 when I started, almost literally nobody accepted Bitcoin. Now it's more, It's still infinitesimal compared to who accepts dollars, but it's more than it was. And I think over time, as Bitcoin becomes more and more used and popular, you'll see the ability to buy with Bitcoin at more and more places. But for now, yeah, you just have to sell it for dollars and then buy it, and then buy whatever you want to buy with those dollars.
So, what do you have, a digital wallet? I mean, if somebody's buying one of your books and they give you, I don't know, 1/100th of a Bitcoin, the current value today, for your book, so you're going to accept that as part of the transaction. So this goes in a digital wallet, and of course this fraction of a very small fraction of a Bitcoin that you receive, that has, I guess, that there's a record of that transaction that becomes part of the Bitcoin itself, correct? Or whatever fraction that you get.
That's right. What happens is that gets recorded on the blockchain. Mm-hmm. That my wallet, like you call it a digital wallet, that's exactly the term. My wallet controls that Bitcoin, that address. Because what happens is you send Bitcoin to an address, like an email address. You send it to an email address, you send it to a Bitcoin address. That the blockchain ledger then says, okay, that Bitcoin you sent is now controlled by that address. And my wallet is the only wallet with the key to unlock that address. Just like I can't send the email from somebody else, without knowing their password or something like that. You can't send Bitcoin controlled by somebody else without their key, their private key. So you obviously want to keep that very secure. And so these wallets, they control those keys. They allow you to say, okay, you have the key for this address, which controls this much Bitcoin. You can send that if you want to. Mm-hmm. Now, there's different types of digital wallets. Some are you would control. They're called custodial wallets, meaning they're controlled by a company that kind of manages the security for you. But that also means they control it. It's kind of like keeping your money at the bank. Mm-hmm. I liken it to like whether you have your money at the bank or in your wallet, in your physical wallet, in your pocket. If you have it at the bank, it's very safe and secure generally, but you don't really have full control of that. That's not really yours because the bank could take it from you. They could get hacked. They could lose it. The government could confiscate it. And this has happened in history, in recent history. So it's your money, but it's not really fully your money. Whereas if you have some cash in your wallet, in your pocket, that's 100% under your control. Yeah. You can do whatever you want with it. The same thing is true with Bitcoin wallets. You can have a wallet with a company, a third party that has that kind of has wallet software online, and you just log in with a password. They control the security, things like that. Or you can also have what's called like a hardware wallet, which is like a wallet that you control that is a physical device that you own, kind of like a phone. It even could be a phone that you control 100%, and nobody could take it from you. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages to both with fiat money and with Bitcoin. If you have your money at a bank, you don't have to worry about somebody coming to your house and like hitting you over the head with a wrench and taking your wallet. Right. The money's at the bank; it's still safe. There's problems with it in the bank, like I already said, but there's advantages. Same thing with if you hold Bitcoin. If you keep it at a third-party exchange, you have the problem that they could go out of business, lose your Bitcoin, they could be hacked, whatever the case may be. But at the same time, they control security. They can't, mess up. Like, for example, if you have your own wallet at home that you control, well, what if you mess it? What if you lose your passphrase to get into it? Well, you're out of luck. If you're with a company like a bank or a Bitcoin exchange online with a wallet, if you lose your password, there's ways that you can recover your account. Mm-hmm. Well, if you control the Bitcoin in your own wallet, if you lose the passphrase, you're gone. You just lose everything in there. So there's advantages and disadvantages. I think it really depends on the person. What is their technical expertise? What's their confidence? How much do they have? What, how significant it is to them? If it's just a little bit of money, you might not care. Just go ahead and put it at your kind of quote unquote Bitcoin bank online or whatever like that. But maybe if you get more, you're like, I want to have more control over this. I worry about it being taken, the company going out of business or something like that. So, in fact, I just read today that the government just made it legal for banks to hold Bitcoin for people. Like regular banks, like, Bank of America or whatever, they can actually now hold Bitcoin for their customers. And like I said, there's advantages and disadvantages to that. And so I don't want to act like one is always better than the other. But that's how you hold your Bitcoin is you control a wallet, which controls the private keys to your addresses. And those addresses are what's on the blockchain saying, okay, this address A controls 1 Bitcoin, address B controls 0.01 Bitcoin, or whatever the case may be.
Interesting. And in just a couple of minutes that we've got left, I know there are some pitfalls, there's some dangers that people should watch out for. In the book, I'm sure we'll explain that a bit. But can you give us a brief, what are the red flags? What should we watch out for? How do we protect ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had people call me up who have lost their Bitcoin because they have done things they shouldn't have done, maybe out of ignorance, maybe out of greed, or whatever the case may be. But the fact is they have lost it. You have to treat it like money. Like, think about your own money, how carefully you keep your own money. I hope you do. Everybody does, because you don't want to lose it. You have to do the same with Bitcoin. And so the number one thing I would recommend is you find, first and foremost, if you're going to buy some Bitcoin, find a reputable company that you buy it from. I mentioned a few in my book. I don't get any sponsorships. I don't get any money for endorsing or anything like that. My favorite is river.com, just it's river, the word river.com.
Mm-hmm.
I think I feel very confident in them because they're very public about what they hold and things like that. But there's other ones as well. I act like they're the only one. So you want to make sure you go with a reputable company, you can hold your Bitcoin there. And then and what I would recommend when you first get started is allow a custodian like a River or whoever to hold it for you, and then learn more and more. And as you learn more, and as you start to own more Bitcoin, it goes up in value. And you're like, I don't want a third party hold this. I want to hold this myself. Then what you can do is you can do research, and you can find out, okay, how can I hold it myself? I can learn the ways in which there's tons of resources out there of how to. And I mentioned some of the different options in my book as well of how you can hold it for yourself. And so I think the key is you'll get emails that will promise you that, just do this and we'll hold your Bitcoin. You'll make a lot of money with stuff like that. Don't just ignore all that. Sometimes you'll get a phone call even. I mean, I've had people call and they just guess they might have some cryptocurrency, some Bitcoin. So they're like, hey, send it here or else this, and just never believe that stuff. You got to just the same checks you put in when you at a bank, you got to do the same thing when you hold Bitcoin.
Wow, very good and very fascinating. This has been a great conversation. It's gone by very fast. And Eric, just let people know about your other book, Bitcoin Basics, 101 Questions and Answers. But the new one, Moral Money, The Case for Bitcoin, available now at your favorite Catholic bookstore and, of course, at SophiaInstitutePress.com. And it really takes the mystery out of it, so we certainly appreciate you writing this book and then coming on Faith with Reasons to talk about it. I wish we had another hour.
Oh, yeah, could have gone another hour for sure. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
We'll get you back on sometime soon, huh, Eric?
Yeah, exactly. I really appreciate you giving me an hour to talk about it. It's a great topic. I'm glad you gave it to me.
Well, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to check out his website, ericsammons.com, as well. And again, thank you for listening to Faith with Reasons. For Shane Stanfield, I'm Ron Finn.